Hey guys, we are at Elevation Church in Charlotte, and I'm here with Nona Jones from Facebook. And Nona, first off, just thank you for being here. And
Pleasure.
tell people about this new position. People may not have any idea of what you do, and it's fairly new, but what do you do with Facebook?
So I am extremely privileged, very blessed to lead the faith-based partnerships work for the company globally, which means I get to work with just incredible leaders and congregations around the world to help them not only connect internally, but also to better understand how to use our platform to build community with people who aren't currently connected in a physical way.
Awesome. And so let's start very, very basic. Should a church be on Facebook? We're going to talk about, Facebook pages, Facebook groups, but for those that are maybe on the fence of, there's so much bad out there on the internet and bad uses of technology, but I'm of the mindset that we can redeem it and use it for good. But let's start with the very basic. Why should a church be on Facebook? And then how could they start using it through pages and groups and things like that?
Sure. So what the research shows, and I think this is important for people to kind of get anchored in what the data shows, is when we think about social media being a bad thing, what the research shows is that it's not good if you're just passively consuming content. So you're basically just sitting there scrolling endlessly. You see people in what appears to be their perfect lives, or their lives are more perfect than yours. But what we know is people curate what they show, right? People don't show the bad side of life. They typically will show what's the best side of life. And so what we know is it's not good if you're passively consuming content. But what the research also shows is that social media is great if you're connecting to other people. And so where Facebook becomes just a fantastic resource, I believe, for individuals and communities of faith, is it becomes a vehicle to connect people with one another and the organizations and institutions that they care most about. And of course, that would include their church, whether they're a member of a church, or I think as relates to church, not a member of a church. And so to your earlier question of should churches be on Facebook, I'm going to wear like dual hats when I answer this question. I'll wear the Facebook hat, and I'll also wear the personal hat. And for those who don't know, I myself am in ministry. My husband is a pastor. We lead a congregation. And so on the one hand, when you think about Facebook as a tool, right? Our mission is to give people the power to build community and bring the world closer together. What many people don't know is that Facebook actually has more than 2 billion users on our platform. So that's a quarter of the Earth's population that's on our platform. Now, kind of taking my Facebook hat off and putting my ministry hat on, I want you to realize that the Great Commission says, go make disciples of all nations, right? If you were to look at where Facebook's users are, it's in every nation, in every continent around the world. And so for a church to really be able to fulfill the Great Commission in this day and age, you don't have to, spend thousands and thousands of dollars on missions trips and getting passports and visas. You can literally reach the nations on this platform. And so I would say emphatically yes. Yeah. Churches should be on Facebook. To your earlier question, though, about it being a positive experience for people, you have to create a community on Facebook where people are actually deriving value, they're connecting to each other in a healthy way, and that's where it becomes valuable. Now, putting my Facebook hat back on, again, our mission is helping people build communities, and it's not just putting people in spaces together. It's building communities where they're deriving value. And so for churches that are able to provide support, churches that are able to connect people to their interests and values, it becomes a meaningful space for people. So, yes.
Yeah, I agree. Not only do I think churches should be on Facebook, I think pastors should be on Facebook. And I mentioned to you over a decade ago, I wrote the foreword for Facebook for Pastors, kind of making the plea for that. So you may have a church, and most of our attendees are lead pastors, but you may have a lead pastor that says, that's great, we've got a young guy on staff and he'll get us on Facebook and keep the Facebook page going. But should the lead pastor him or herself, should they be on Facebook? Have their own personal profile?
Well, so let's kind of get into this idea of first impressions, right? The way that I would advise anyone to treat Facebook is really the way that you would operate in real life, because you're interacting with people. And so the way I would answer that question is, unless you're willing to delegate your presence and your leadership in real life to someone else, you should be on Facebook, because that's where people are. What we know is that people often will go to Facebook to check out a prospective church before they go to their website, before they go to their other social media. So if you want people to connect with your church and connect with you as the leader, Facebook is the best way to do it. I do recognize, being married to a pastor, being in ministry myself, that there can sometimes be trepidation there, because, people can share freely what they think about you and about your church. And, sometimes it's not always good and it can be discouraging. At the same time, I think that's an opportunity, because when people share feedback that isn't necessarily the nicest, it gives you a chance to engage with them and just say, you know what? I appreciate the fact that you felt comfortable sharing this. Let me tell you a little bit more about our church and why we do what we do. Because if you don't engage, you basically give the narrative to that person. And so, I would always encourage people, have a presence on Facebook, engage, be a part of the conversation, because your absence doesn't mean that the conversation is going away. Right. So definitely be there.
Yeah, and I remember back when I wrote that forward and I was advocating for it, the breaking down the clergy laity wall. I remember watching some well-known pastors, I'm not going to name them, but some well-known pastors that just showed us a glimpse into their everyday life of, I just finished cutting the grass, or I'm throwing the football with my son, or I just saw my daughter's dance recital, or we're going to a movie. It reminded me of when I was a kid and I would see my teacher outside the classroom. It kind of freaked me out.
Surreal, yeah.
Of what is she doing out of the classroom?
Right.
And so I think kind of breaking down that clergy laity wall of, hey, I'm a real person.
Absolutely.
And, I date my wife and I take my kids to activities, and, just seeing the guy, or person behind the pulpit, out in real life, I think is huge.
Absolutely, and I think that's really what community is about. It's like, understand, we're real people, and I'm going to go off track just a little bit, because I think it's important for pastors to hear this. Is, I know what it's like when people see you as other than human, right? And so they hold you to this standard that you can't meet because you're not God. But when they see you as a real person, they see you cutting the grass, they read about your frustration with the cashier at Publix or whatever, then they realize, oh, you're just like me. It's like, okay, I'm not going to hold you to this impossibly high standard, because you are human. Right. So it's good.
All right, Nona, there's this, thought of pages, groups, both, either or. And then, in the church world, you have people that have pages for everything. The men's ministry, the women's ministry, the children's ministry, the youth ministry, everybody's got a page. Where do groups come in? How can people use groups? Should they use groups? And then how do you view it as an overview summary of how churches could use both or either or?
So, I like to describe the difference between a page and a group using an illustration. So, if you think about your organization, obviously your church, as like a house on Facebook, like think about, this is your house on Facebook. The page would really be like your front porch. It's your front patio where people can kind of come, they can, take you in a casual way, they can kind of see what you're about. That's how you use your page. It's basically like broadcasting out. Your group is very much so like your living room. It's like your kitchen. It's a space where you can have more vulnerable conversations. You can get to know each other a lot better in a deeper way. My recommendation to the churches I've been working with is, you want to have both, because they serve different purposes. So your page really enables you to go wide, cast a wide net, your group is what allows you to go deep and really understand not only the individuals connected to your church in a deeper way, but it also enables them to get to know you and your organization better too. As an example, I'm working with really, really large churches. And as you can imagine, as your church grows, sometimes you can kind of get disconnected from what's happening within the body of people. One of the churches I'm working with, in their group, there's been a lot of conversations about suicide among teens within that church. Parents have basically been saying, look, my middle schooler just tried to commit suicide last night. Like this is, what do I do? And so because the leaders have been seeing these posts happening pretty regularly, they're recognizing that this is an issue within their church that they need to grapple with.
Yes.
But that's not something you're going to find out on a page.
Right.
People aren't going to come on the page and be like,
example.
hey guys, my kid. But in a group, people feel safe, they feel like they can be vulnerable, and it allows you to connect with each other, and it kind of lowers the barrier. Similarly, I've seen pastors that have used Facebook Live in groups to really kind of connect in a deeper way with their congregation. So you can do, say you have a great Sunday, you give this powerful message. On Monday, you can do a check-in. Or Tuesday, you can go live in the group and say, hey, let me know what questions you have based on the sermon that I shared yesterday or the day before, because I'd love to answer those. Similarly, you can also give people a sneak peek into your life. Like heading to the airport, God just deposited something into my spirit that I want to share with you all, just as some encouragement. And you don't need a building for that. So the Facebook group really becomes the place to build your community. And the page, again, is the place where you can cast a wide net and broadcast out, while at the same time using your group to go deep and build those community connections.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to know there are different kinds of groups. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so there's different privacy settings for a group. So you can have a public group that's essentially like a page. Like you don't have to request to join the group. It's just there. You can join it. Nobody approves it. Then there's a closed group, which is essentially you have to request to join the group, or you can be invited to join the group, but your membership has to be approved by an administrator of the group. So essentially you have more control over who's in the group. And then there's a secret group. Those are the groups that you literally cannot find them in a search because you have to be invited. I recommend a secret group typically for things that are incredibly vulnerable, things like addiction recovery, or maybe divorce support, or there are things happening within your church. Accountability, exactly. Things people are struggling with, you might want to put them in a secret group. But the closed group is a great space where people can only see the content if they're in the group, and they feel like they can be more vulnerable because only people in the group can see that content.
Is it overly simplistic to think of like a page being external and a group being more internal?
Nope, that's very, very true. So your page really is your external kind of presence to the world, whereas the group is really about people who want to be connected to you in a very deep way. Because anybody can like a page.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to show up or that they're going to actually engage. But if they're part of your group, it's because they deeply care about your organization and what you're trying to do in the world.
Now you briefly mentioned a second ago Facebook Live.
Yep.
And a lot of people are very curious about Facebook Live, and there are some ways that I'd love for you to share, ways that churches could use Facebook Live. You mentioned maybe a pastor sharing what he's up to, but you can also stream your services, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And also, what does it cost? Like some people, we're here in a studio with a boom mic and camera, but you don't necessarily have to have all that. So what would it take for a church to utilize and get up and going with Facebook Live?
All you need is an internet-enabled device. You can use an iPad, an iPhone, a Samsung, whatever device you have to go live. As long as you have a Facebook account, you can literally just go live. And it's such a great tool because it's free. So there's nothing to pay for. You can certainly use a tripod to try to stabilize the device, which I would definitely recommend.
I recommend that.
Yeah, because as things get going in service and then you're like shaking and you're excited, you can kind of lose the image. But it's very, very low equipment necessary to have a good stream, and it's organic reach. So I mean, people when they see a Facebook Live come up in their news feed, they very much so like to check it out and see what's happening. You can tag the location. So tag your church and people can see what's happening specifically at your church. And what's great about Facebook Live is after it's done, it's archived in the person's videos.
Yeah.
And so it's always going to be there. And what's super cool is you can go live on your page and actually have it as your church live stream. So it'll be archived in your videos as well.
So you could have a Facebook Live on a page streaming your service, but what is a creative way? Let's say I'm a group admin of the men's ministry, and I want to do a Facebook Live into my group. That's all possible, right? Or say you're the head of the women's ministry and you want to deliver a message just to that closed group. Like,
it's absolutely possible. And as a matter of fact, I'm glad you brought that up. So there was a church I've been working with in Florida where they were seeing a tremendous decline in attendance for their youth Bible study. Like at one point it was like 50 kids were coming and it dwindled down to like eight kids. It was really, really disappointing and discouraging to the youth pastor because, you prepared this whole week for this convening and only 8 kids were showing up. So I made the suggestion. I was like, I'll tell you what, why don't you just create a youth group that's attached to your Facebook group and then like go live in the group. They had 500 kids that actually tuned in for that. And so it just shows like sometimes the building is a barrier, right? And so we want to use technology in order to continue to connect people beyond the building.
Yeah, and I was mentioning to you earlier that I've always been an advocate for being a digital missionary. Go where the people are, whether it be youth, our age. My mom and mother-in-law are big on Facebook. They're probably on Facebook more than I am. I can put a post up, and a second later, my mother-in-law has liked it.
Yes,
instantly. But go where they are. Be a digital missionary. And so I love that, and I love that, like you mentioned, Facebook Live is a free resource.
Free.
You just get an iPhone or a Samsung. You put it on a tripod, which I recommend, and boom, you're on your page. And then, like you said, you can go back and it's archived. I've looked at churches and I could see, such and such pastor would say, 3 weeks ago we had an amazing service. It's probably one of my favorite messages, and I can scroll back 3 weeks and watch it. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. No, that's a great tool. I recommend the churches use it.
All right, Nona. We have reached the part of the talk where some people may check out the dirty word of marketing. I'm a big believer in Facebook ads, and I have a Facebook group where somebody just the other week said, "Hey, we're thinking about doing ads. What do you guys think?" And I was the first to comment and said, "Yes, do it." How do people get started? We were talking off camera that how specific and how targeted your ads could be, but a lot of people may not realize that. And so give us an overview of what we need to know about ads and how we could use them.
Sure. Well, Facebook ads are such a great tool in order to help amplify your message. So whether your message is there's an event coming up or whether you just want to share general information about your congregation, it's a great tool because the reality is a little goes a long way. If you've never used Facebook ads before, you can spend a few dollars and reach a few thousand people. And you can also target your campaign very, very precisely. So you can indicate, demographics. Is it, men, women? You can indicate age ranges, locations. It may be something you want to do just in your local zip code, or maybe something that you want to do across a region or state or even nationally. You can make those decisions and you can really target your campaign to the audience that you're trying to reach. So it's a fantastic tool. And I would say this, I know some people think, church marketing is like a dirty concept or a dirty word. What I would say is let's reframe that and let's remember, putting my ministry hat on, let's remember what it is that we're actually promoting, and that is life, right? That's the opportunity for people to experience eternal life. And so to me, that's not a dirty thing at all. That's actually something to be celebrated. And so I think the tool that Facebook provides is something that, again, is extremely economical, but also highly effective.
I agree. And, we're talking about this tool of social media, Facebook, marketing, ads. The way I've always tried to describe it is that it's not an isolated event. It actually is a part of a larger, broader communication strategy. And one of the things that I love to see happen, because I've seen it in my ministry career, is when the medium and tool of Facebook and social media is met with a personal invite. When somebody invites their friend, family, neighbor, coworker, classmate, and say, "Would you check out our church? What church do you go to?" Grace Church. "Oh, I saw them on Facebook." And it's when it all comes together of you've had these targeted ads that are targeting your city, and it just puts this little thought in their head of, "Oh, that sounds interesting. Oh, I need to check them out one day." And then when somebody makes that invite, it just kind of culminates in, "Yeah, I'll check you out." But how do you guys use it at your church? You're a leader. Excuse me. You're a leader at your church, and how do you guys view first impressions and what you want guests to experience when they come to visit?
Yeah, so as you said, like I'm approaching this really with two hats. Like I'm thinking about it, from the Facebook lens, but then I'm also thinking about it from the real life lens of what happens at our church on a regular basis. My husband's a pastor, which means that I think in many churches the pastor's wife has a very different role, but at our church, like, I'm very focused on making connections with people, and so before worship, I will go and I will greet people personally before worship, just so everyone knows that I see them and that they're valued. And then after worship, my husband and I also exit a little bit early so that we can also greet people as they're exiting.
Okay.
And then we also have a team of ushers and greeters that as people are coming up to the church building, they have signs, things that say, "You look amazing today," or
Yeah.
"We're so glad you're here," just because we want people to smile. We want them to feel like, one, we see you, and two, we're glad that you actually took the time out of your day to come and be a part. And then we encourage all of our congregants to also greet people, especially people that, are new faces. Make sure you, reach out, give them a hug, and just let them know that we're glad they're here. And then, we just try to connect with them throughout the service. We have an opportunity to just, hug the person next to you and let them know that you see them, because that's so important. It doesn't matter if your church is big or small. You can be in a small church and still feel invisible. And so I think it's important that as leaders, we're intentional with our leaders as well as ourselves. What I have found is that our leaders look to us as the example. So I would never ask someone to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. And so that's what I believe the first impression is how am I presenting myself to my leaders first? And then how are they presenting the church to the people who are guests on a Sunday?
That's good. That's good. I can't help but think we're here at Elevation Church, the Elevation Orange. And one of the things I talked about recently when I spoke somewhere is a concept that was really ingrained into me as a volunteer greeter at Elevation, and that is kind of what you talked about, looking at people, making eye contact, and what that communicates. When we arrived to set up for the shoot, we were standing in the office, and every single staff member that were going and coming and walking by looked at us and said, "Hello, hello, hi, hi." Every single one made eye contact with us as they were going and coming, and saw us standing in the office and said hello. I think it's just, when I think about it, it's part of the fruit of the Spirit. It's part of just being a Christ follower, being loving, welcoming, caring, compassionate. You have a great spirit. It's been great talking with you, and I hope to visit your church one day. I'd love to see what you guys are doing there, meet your husband, and hear him bring the word. And so I am personally, I say this on behalf of all the people watching this, thrilled about you in this position with Facebook. I'm so thankful that the Big C Church is being represented, and that you are heading up initiatives to teach us, train us, resource us, and I just thank God for you, and I'm excited about this new position.
Well, let me say, I thank God for you in this ministry and how you're not only impacting the lives of church leaders, but you're impacting the lives of the people who will come to the church because you're equipping them to do this work. I really believe that this is a ministry, and clearly you've been called to it, so thank you for having me. This is awesome.
Yeah, thank you for being here.